Welcome. Thanks to everyone for coming. My name is Jess Schwartz, and I'm a community manager for Google Search. I'm thrilled to be introducing Zach Ware of the Downtown Project in Las Vegas. In addition to being one of our talks at Google, this is also one of our Google community talks in which we bring in outside leaders to talk about online and offline, in this case, communities. When I learned about the Downtown Project almost a year ago, I thought about bringing them to Google for a variety of reasons, and I assume we have a variety of people in the room that represent these. At Google, we embrace big ideas. Trying to make Las Vegas into the most community-centric city on the planet certainly is one. Oops. No matter what office you work in at Google, whether you're here or Boulder in Beijing, the type of relationship that Las Vegas wants to have, or rather that Zappos wants to have with Las Vegas, is very different than the kind of relationship that we imagine at Google. It's also intriguing to consider that many of us here at Google are fans of Zappos and its culture. You only need to look at our mail pods to see that. And finally, plenty of us have visited Las Vegas, but how many of us have really considered what it would mean to not leave and to call Las Vegas home? When I initially reached out to the Downtown Project, Zach and Tony agreed on one condition, very smartly, that in exchange for having one of them come, we send someone to their speaker series. So a big thanks to Meng, our jolly good fellow here, for making this possible, because he went to Las Vegas on our behalf, and now we have Zach.
I think Las Vegas at the better end of that stick, actually.
And also a big thank you to my partner in crime for the talk series, Jackie Hayward. And the biggest thanks of all goes to Zach for being here. He focuses on creating the most connected city in the world in downtown Las Vegas as a part of Zappos and Tony Hsieh's Downtown Project. He is the founder and CEO of Project 100 and co-founder of Work in Progress. He focuses on connectivity, mobility, and infrastructure in the Downtown Project and is a general partner at VegasTechFund. And along the way, he developed and launched Zappos' downtown Las Vegas campus after heading up tech product management at Zappos. So let's give a warm welcome to Zach.
Thank you. So that was, is this working? Can you hear me? Oh, this is probably people elsewhere, right? Yeah. So that's one way of saying that I came from tech, which I'm sure a lot of you are focused on. And I've spent the last 2.5 years helping to develop a city, including a 300,000 square foot building. And a variety of other things. So I think it's kind of an interesting story about how we can take the concepts of product management, concepts of technology development, and apply them to cities. And it's frustrating at the same time. I'm going to tell you a few stories. I'm going to tell you a little bit. It's really weird to be giving a talk and not hear the microphone. It's very odd. So I'm going to give you a few stories about how we've approached Las Vegas and why. Tell you the history of why we came to be in downtown Vegas and how that's evolved over time. To give you a little bit of background about me, I actually grew up on a tobacco farm, and I learned to drive on that, which is it's actually pixelated, but it looks just about as bad when it's in HD. I'm a computer science guy, an econ guy. My career started in food, and it stayed in food for quite a while, and then moved into product management at Zappos through some very odd serendipitous interactions. That was me in 2010, and since 2010, I've had the opportunity to do things sort of in reverse order. My work in downtown Vegas and Tony's work in downtown Vegas really centered around the new headquarters, and I'll talk a little bit about how that evolved over time. We launched VegasTechFund. We started Downtown Project after really realizing that the opportunity and the need in downtown Vegas was larger than just what our company could do inside of our campus. Work in Progress is something we started to focus on helping startups find space and tools to be successful. And then some of you might have heard a little bit about the largest order ever placed for Teslas in North America. That's Project 100. We placed an order for 100 Model S's, and I'll tell you a little bit about that and how it impacts how we think a city can function. I have to do this just for the sake of my assistant. It's the cutest thing you'll ever see. I just found out about 2 weeks ago, she sort of quietly, without telling me, been managing a pretty large Etsy store where she makes knitted things for babies, and it's the cutest thing you've ever seen. It's a mermaid with a little bikini top. That child is going to hate her parents when she told her. So a little bit of background on how we started our evolution in downtown Vegas. You all know about Zappos and our culture, and really the number one thing for us as the company's evolved, and particularly as we get to scale today, is keeping that culture alive. The number one reason we're able to provide the customer service we provide, the happiness to our customers, and ultimately the happiness in downtown Vegas is because of our focus almost exclusively on culture. And so, one of the ways that sort of came to pass was through our core values. One of the things Tony will tell you is the number one regret he has in building Zappos and starting 15 years ago is that we didn't adopt the core values sooner. And they really aren't this thing that we created at the top of the company and passed down. It's something that really came from the bottom up. And these core values are what we hire and fire against. And as we evolved over time at Zappos, we really started to think more about how those applied at scale. And that's important to remember as we evolve through the talk today. So we have this thing at Zappos we call the 3 C's: clothing, customer service, and culture. And those are the 3 things we focus the most on. Clothing really came out of this idea that we wanted to grow out of being a shoe company. And even today, if you go on Zappos, 90% of what you will see on the homepage will probably not be shoes or housewares, bags, and much, much more. That recipe, those 3 C's and that focus on culture, as you guys know, propelled us not only to over $1 billion in gross merchandise sales, but this year will be over $3 billion. A couple of years ago, we were obviously acquired by Amazon.com, but through the process, it remained very independent. And a big part of that is because of our core values and our focus on culture. Currently, we live in this really kind of nondescript campus. I was talking this morning about how the multi-building kind of campus structure can be really challenging. And for us at Zappos, we've grown out of this. Number one, this is our building 2. Building 1 was really for about 150 people, and then 300. And we took the next floor, and then the second building, the next floor, and the third building, which became like Siberia, where people go to work and you don't see them for 4 months, and you wonder when you see them how long maybe they've been on vacation. You're surprised they still work there. And so what we've been able to do at Zappos with our culture has been in spite of the building that we're in. So through the course of the last about 7 or 8 years, really kind of starting when we went to the second floor of the Henderson campus, it was really important to us to think about how we get everybody under one roof. We aren't growing as fast from a headcount standpoint as you guys are, so we can think about maybe one gigantic building, and that might last us 15 years. For you, that probably lasts you about 15 days. But at Zappos, we could really think about a corporate campus that's maybe 3 times the size of what we have today as something we can think of as a 30-year investment. So we started looking at campuses. We looked at Nike. We came here. We were inspired by what Apple's doing in Cupertino, by the spaceship-like object. It looks like it's just going to take off one day. And the reason we really liked it is probably one of the main reasons you like this campus. It's the prevalence of all these services, these things that not only keep you here from 7 a.m. to midnight, but really do make your life a little bit better. The bar, the sushi place, the park, the things to do. And that really goes to the heart of a lifestyle of a company. And as we thought about it, we thought, yeah, we want the yoga studio. And in the Nike campus, they have a pub. And around the edge, they have a running track. And we thought, yeah, that's actually what we want too. The pub part, we really don't care about the running track part. And the more we thought about it, though, the more we thought, this feels like the same thing everyone else is doing, but for some reason, every time we go to somewhere like New York, we're really inspired by the overlap between a student at NYU and a person working in a company, and the people that interact and run into each other from different backgrounds. We like this concept of a busy storefront, a busy street, people interacting in ways that they didn't plan. Co-working spaces, the concept of being able to just camp out and not necessarily be inside of your campus. And ultimately, this is the photo that we looked at, which kind of looks like one of those Micro Machines photos, but it really sort of gets to the heart of how we see a vision for how a city operates. It's these collisions and this density that creates these opportunities for amazing things to happen. And the reason that mattered to us was we were thinking about the growth of the company. And when you get to a certain point, we're currently at about 1,500 employees. When you get to a certain point, you begin to lose that happiness and that innovation and that productivity. A lot of middle managers come in. People get siloed. They're in 3 different buildings. Lots of things happen that ultimately drive down the reason why we get up and go to work in the first place, which is to be happy. And so what we found when we looked at research on cities, which happened to be a very just sort of random thing a few of us were reading about, we realized that the exact opposite is true for cities. As a city doubles in size, productivity and happiness increases by 15%. But it's not at all true for companies. So our thought was, what would happen if we took the lessons of Zappos and applied them to the work we think a city could use to invest in culture and the spirit of optimism and happiness, but also take the lessons of a city and apply them to a company. So in a few different bodies of research, Jane Jacobs, Ed Glazer, which I'll talk about in a minute, and many, many others, we found there were three key elements to creating this environment of serendipity that really makes a city magical. That's residential density of at least 100 people per acre, street level activity, the kind of things you see happening here is kind of a version of a street level activity, and a culture of openness and collaboration. When you look at historically back to Rome all the way through the successful cities of the last 1,000 years, the things that the cities that made it through the hard times were cities that had those elements, 100% of the time. Cities that didn't, like Detroit, took an element like number 2 and said, no, we'll build an elevated train and put all the activity above the ground. And ultimately that small decision, which was designed for convenience to connect different people from different parts of the city, ultimately drove down the culture of innovation. It was a good idea, but it was a key contributor to the failure of the core of Detroit. So we thought, how can we take all these things, wrap them up into one recipe and invest in our company going forward? And we recognized that a key part of Zappos culture was maximizing serendipitous interactions, having one door in and one door out. We liked the concept of density in the office, partially because we were cheap and when we were all kind of crammed on top of each other, but more and more the research that we realized that the density in an office, the typical 200 square feet per person, was actually something that was causing a lot of rifts between people. So we felt that we could take some of the density ideas that make a city successful, apply them to our company, and ultimately make decisions that allow people to connect more freely and prioritize collisions over convenience. And I'll show you an example about that in a minute. So think about downtown Las Vegas. It was sort of serendipitous that a bunch of us were hanging out there. We were in this sort of nameless city. Vegas is a place, we were just talking about it over lunch. Vegas is a place that no one feels like belongs to them. You live in someone else's city. If you've ever visited Vegas as a tourist, you kind of take over. And when you live in Vegas, you feel that power coming from the Strip. We found this little enclave in downtown Las Vegas, this 2-block area that had a really amazing coffee shop, a lot of really cool things happening with a very small group of people from the arts area, from the creative area, from the music space. And we said, this is actually a place we want to hang out. So a few of us were independently hanging out there, and as we were thinking about the evolution of the campus, we discovered this building, which is, it's not like you can't see it from a mile away, but we discovered the building that would soon become the former Las Vegas City Hall was becoming available. And we thought that was interesting because 1, it was about twice as large as our current office, which made a lot of sense for us. And 2, it included about 5 acres of property, which would allow us to expand over time. So this idea of creating an urban center for our company was something that was actually within our reach, instead of going out to the desert and building a really great but ultimately lonely campus. Bars like Downtown Cocktail Room, which I highly suggest you visit if you come to Vegas, or The Beat, which is the center of activity in downtown Vegas. Upstairs and behind it is Emergency Arts, which provides 100 to 200 square feet for artists to have small galleries for $200 to $300 a month, which is the first time in Vegas that an independent artist had the opportunity to display and share their craft, versus a massive gallery at the Bellagio, which an independent artist would never get into. So we started thinking a lot about the way that Apple campus looked, but started taking the same things that we saw there and saying, well, how do we bring those to a city and ultimately flip our campus inside out? Take what we would normally put in the courtyard and put it on the street and make it open to everybody. What would happen if we did that? And along the way, we came up with this idea that maybe we should start thinking a little bit more about the community as a part of what we're doing in our company. So we added a 4th C to our 3 Cs. And are really now super focused on community. And that word is used a lot to describe a lot of different things. Obviously, we're talking to the community team, or a lot of you are. So for you, the definition is one thing. For us, it's a little bit different, but it all centers around this activity of connecting people. So we thought, yeah, that little map I showed you a second ago looks kind of good, but it'd look a lot better if it looked like this. And as we thought about it more, we thought this little piece of property that we have on the north side of downtown Las Vegas probably isn't the best place to center the activity. We're telling everybody we're moving our company to an urban core, but there is no urban core. There's a coffee shop and a bar, and occasionally there's a festival, but that's it. So we started Downtown Project. And this is an independent effort outside of Zappos that most people think is a part of Zappos. Headlines will read from writers that don't necessarily do the time to do the research that Zappos bought a motel. Zappos did this, Zappos did that, when in fact anything that is in our campus is Downtown Project. And what Downtown Project is, it's something that people think has been around for 4 or 5 years because of it seems like we have our things together and all of our plans in a row, but trust me, we don't. We came up with this idea in late 2011, launched in early 2012. And in the last 18 months have done a lot to help invest in revitalizing the city, but every day, we like to refer to it as a city, as a startup, every day is a little bit different. So Downtown Project is an initiative of about $350 million of primarily Tony's personal funds and a few other investors that's focused on 4 key areas. And I'm going to talk through the why of those in the next few minutes. $50 million to small business. You remember when I talked earlier about the ground level activity? Our thought process is instead of investing in creating the activity artificially and bringing in a McDonald's or a Subway or a Starbucks, we want to invest in independent entrepreneurs who are passionate about what they do. The concept that we're trying to follow is that instead of having one gigantic idea that brings activity to the ground, let's invest in 1,000 small ideas. Those 1,000 small ideas are going to be more exciting, they're going to be more fun for you guys to hang out with, and 3, they're more likely to collectively be successful because they create a density of creativity and excitement that a Starbucks or a Subway can't do. We're investing in $50 million in the startup community. Most of that is through VegasTechFund, some of it's through a few other initiatives. $50 million in education, arts, and culture, which is an area that is actually quite a bit of fun and a little bit surprising. And then $200 million in real estate. And on the real estate front, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of curation and why we're acquiring and redeveloping as much as we are, but in as little of a disruptive way as possible. So you won't see in any areas that we're focusing on an edifice of a shrine to Tony. When I was talking about real estate, the ultimate goal for Downtown Project is to create an environment where people can live, work, and play within walking distance. We talk about creating the most community-focused large city in the world, and the way we've actually evolved over the last year is to really think about that as the most connected large city in the world. Community focus is a weird thing to interpret, but connected is an easy thing to understand. One of the ways we do that, and one of our biggest focuses, is to really invest in creating what we call the co-learning and co-working capital of the world. This doesn't mean we have tons and tons of co-working spaces. It means that everything we do is about creating places for people to gather, to work, to connect, to teach. Every one of you has a skill you can teach everyone else in this room. And the trick in a growing community is to pull out the formalities and allow you the opportunity to share those skills with someone who wants to learn them. So in a lot of ways, we're just creating an environment that supports that kind of thing. In fact, one of our biggest investments is in Skillshare. And I'm having drinks with their CEO tonight. And for the last year, that we have been their #1 test city for creating opportunities for people to teach and share and learn, which has been a really interesting thing to see. I took a basket weaving class about 8 months ago, which was one of the weirdest things I've ever done. So at our core, when we think about return, people ask us, how does this work as a business? And that's a fun question for us to answer. There's a couple technical ways I sometimes approach it, but the easiest way to understand it in terms of how we're spending $350 million and what we plan to get out of it, it's not a charity. We're not handing this money out to anyone who wants it. We don't consider it to be money that is gone. It's very much a for-profit endeavor, but in a way that people maybe don't understand. We focus on what we call ROC. We'd like to look at all the investments that we make and think about how they collectively create community. So if I invest in a residential project or a restaurant or a co-working space or a music festival, what are the elements of that idea that help create opportunities for people to connect? And then collectively, when you take all those investments, maybe 1, 2, 10, 50 of them don't have a clear business model up front, but they solve a chicken and egg problem. A startup won't come to town if they have a ton of family people, like kids in their family, that don't have anywhere to play. They don't have a dog park. So what business model does a dog park have? It enables 30 or 40 startup employees to come live in a neighborhood. So we look at everything we do as a way to invest in a collective versus a single investment. And the other way we look at this concept of serendipity, which is something that just came up not too long ago after we read a couple of books that focused on this, we started thinking about this concept of return on luck. And that's a way that for a long time we had a difficult time explaining why we thought accelerating serendipity made sense. But what we actually realized is if you look back at what separates great companies from decent companies, the one key indicator of a company's potential growth over time is how they capture and how they seize moments of luck. These things that happen, these interactions that happen, these good things, these bad things, and how they tackle those things. So to us, institutionalizing these opportunities to connect and take advantage of of opportunities that you didn't anticipate having in life, whether they're good or bad, is something that can have a massive impact on the way a community evolves. So our big bet, accelerating collisions, community, and co-learning will lead essentially to happiness, luckiness, innovation, and productivity. And that goes back to the elements of a city that we've seen successful over the last 1,000 years, but haven't necessarily been employed in a deliberate way really ever. Because in every single case, instead of breaking down investments this way, developers and cities break down investments in massive ways. A big stadium, a big research university, a massive hospital, $1 billion project that can pass or fail without really anybody in the community interacting with it. Is it a good sports team? Does anyone care about the team? That really isn't in your control. But if there are 1,000 small, really amazing ideas, each one of you can contribute to making those successful, and collectively the neighborhood can grow. So I wanted to break down for a second really quickly kind of how we approach small business. People have asked us before, they come to us all the time and say, there's 6 or 7 of these amazing bars in the US, don't you guys want one in Vegas? And we say, it'd be great if there's one in Vegas, we're just not going to invest in it. Because we want to have something that is story-worthy, that is unique, that creates a sense of place and an emotional connection with the community that's there. In a lot of cases, we find our best investments from people like Natalie, who will kill me if she knew that photo was up here right now. And she's a tough chef. She'd been at the Hard Rock for 4 or 5 years and hated her job and was leaving Vegas and spent a lot of time downtown, was working part-time at the coffee shop, and everybody wanted to see her stay. Everybody wanted to see her be successful. And 4 or 5 different people started coming up to us at Downtown Project and saying, you've got to find a way to invest in Natalie. At the time, we had not told anybody we were investing in any restaurants. We didn't have that idea yet. We didn't own any real estate. But about 6 months later, when we finally realized we were going to have the opportunity to do it, she's the first person we called. And she opened a restaurant called Eat, which is probably the busiest restaurant in downtown Vegas right now, of the 7 or 8 that have opened in the last couple of years. She told us a number the other day that in the last year, in a little over a year, she's had more than 100,000 meals served in her restaurant. That's 100,000 opportunities for collisions that wouldn't have been there before. And it got us to thinking a lot about how we think about investments as opportunities to maximize collisions per square foot versus dollars per square foot. And I'll get to that in a minute. To our ethos of how we redevelop real estate, we bought a check cashing, we call it checks cashed, a check cashing location in the middle of Fremont East. This is what it looked like when we took it over. In the back there you see the bulletproof glass and the iron wall. We met someone named Sarah, who's Tony's known for a while, and a few of us just met a couple of years ago, who's always wanted to open a fashion store. So she took checks cashed and she did it. She painted the floor, she rusted up the back, and she brought in independent clothing. For the first time in Vegas, you can go into a store and buy the things you buy on Hay Street or wherever you might shop in San Francisco. You can actually get independent clothes in Las Vegas. It's unique. It's the first time it's ever been done. And every time you go in there, it's different. We like the concept of shipping containers. I used to live in Hayes Valley, and I was obsessed with the Proxy project, which turned out, after I got to know the people that built it, it turned out to be quite a bit more complicated for them to build and quite a bit more expensive than they initially anticipated. But we had hope, and we wanted to build it in Las Vegas, and we started with 4 to give this opportunity for people to have a shipping container with a restaurant or a bar or a store that can rapidly test an idea instead of spending $500,000 to build a crazy, beautiful storefront. How do we basically do what Proxy did? We learned the same thing that the Proxy folks did. It's really hard, particularly in a city that's never had a shipping container as a building before and cares a lot about fire code. We had some challenges, but it gave us a chance to experiment. So we started building it. We bought a Motel 6, which needed to be condemned. It's a half city block, and we kind of went crazy and over-designed it. The kind of photobombing there on the bottom right is Ern, which is another story. I just noticed that earlier today. I'm like, it really looks like Ern is photobombing. Ern is my neighbor. He used to be a Zappos employee until about 4 years ago. He left to build a barbecue sauce business and make some of the best barbecue sauce I've ever had, and then got into doing barbecue as a catering operation. Ern's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. That container right there is actually the one that will house Ern's Barbecue in the container park, which is this massive center of activity that it's probably the biggest real estate project we've invested in, and probably the only one that we're going to be building from scratch. It centers around a kids area. So in the middle, we have this element of a kids play area that's surrounded by restaurants, bars, and retail shops. It's 2 stories on one side, 3 stories on the other, and when it opens, we'll have 30 or 40 small format retail locations for small businesses to experiment, again, without having to spend $500,000 just to build a storefront.
Where is that?
Downtown, it's a Fremont and 6th or 7th, yeah. Just an amazing center of activity centered around the kids area and a music stage. If you guys aren't familiar with Kaboom, those little blue blocks are one of the most fun things you'll ever play with. I've lost a lot of hours to that. Then moving into the startup ecosystem, for us, the environment of rapidly creating, this is something that I don't need to spend a lot of time telling you guys about, but rapidly creating companies, rapidly creating ideas in a fail-safe environment where with the right density, you can create an idea, fail, and you know the ecosystem is going to support you getting another job. This is what makes San Francisco so magical. That is the success of SF, is that I can go work for a crazy company, we can fail, and I know that I'll have a job the next day somewhere. In Vegas, that wasn't always the case. So our focus for the first year and a half was investing in density of engineering and startup talent. We did that, and now we're moving into the world where we're starting to see that ecosystem pay off. Our original idea was taking a look at the startup hubs of the world. We said, what makes that gigantic blue blob or the one in New York or even the ones in Austin and Portland and Seattle so powerful? And what we found was the common elements between all the different startup ecosystems were 4 things. You don't mind if I cuss. Proximity to others working on cool shit, proximity to those who can help you, access to capital and space. Basically, proximity, money, and a place to do something. And at the end of the day, if you think about that formula, it's really not that difficult to create. It's just a matter of someone coming in and deliberately doing that without the normal gatekeepers that you see in a lot of communities, the application process, the guy at the front door that won't let you in. Why can't a neighborhood actually reflect what, to some degree, 500 or YC has done with an application? Proximity to others working on cool stuff, people who can help you, access to capital. Nevada's nowhere in the top 25 of capital friendly places right now. And space. This is a map of all the co-working spaces in the country as of about 8 months ago. First of all, Las Vegas had 0, which was really kind of depressing. So we fixed that. And our overall methodology is pretty simple, and this is something that I shared with the Zappos technology leadership after I left and was a part of investing in 4 companies that ended up pulling about 10 Zappos engineers out of tech, so the VP of engineering hated me. And I explained to him that you think about this concept of 3 companies of 3 people. And one of these days, those 3 companies are going to be 3 companies of 10 people. And somewhere along the way, one person from each of those companies is going to split off and start his own company, and that company is going to be 10 people. And somewhere right around there's at least 1, 2, 3 big companies, in our case Zappos, and what's so magical about having that big company is there's someone there who wants to start a startup, and there's someone in a startup who really wants to have health insurance. And when you create the opportunity for those to flip-flop back and forth, you create this ecosystem where you've got one guy coming in from a startup into the big company and vice versa, and it just starts to revolve and support itself. Someone has to take the hit up front, and Zappos Tech took the hit up front. And we lost about 20 people in Zappos Tech to different startups over the last year and a half. But for us, it made a lot of sense. Google would not be here if it weren't for the fact that there's an ecosystem. There's people that you can draw talent from. And that's what makes Silicon Valley and SF work, and we're well on our way in Las Vegas. Another area that we focus on is really trying to create the right pool of talent and pool of support. So we made a big bet on Venture for America. We've actually just welcomed our 14th fellow over the last 2 years. This is an organization, if you're not familiar with it, you should be. Essentially the founder, his mission in life is to save college graduates from investment banks. And so he takes these amazing college grads from some of the best schools in the country. It's amazing, it's only 2 years old, but the people that you meet are the #1 in their class at Georgetown, and people who graduate with a 4.9 from MIT. These are people that can go anywhere in life, and they choose to follow a startup path. We invest in Teach for America. We have a major partnership with them in Vegas to help bring more teachers to the downtown school system, which is amongst the worst in Las Vegas, which is amongst the worst in the country. It's been a pretty awesome partnership, and over the last 2 years, we've been able to bring about 20 to 25 new teachers to downtown schools. We've invested in our opening this fall, the Ninth Bridge School, in a former church building that the city owned. They're actually moving furniture in tomorrow, which is pretty impressive. They're starting as a pre-K through kindergarten and then adding a grade every year. And it's kind of goes to the heart of how we invest. There's so much wrong with education in the world, but no one willing to take the bets. So by investing in creating a fully private institution that doesn't take government money, we're able to bring people like Sal Khan and others in who have innovative ways of teaching people and try it in schools. Get forward-thinking parents and forward-thinking kids to think about ways to do education differently. And it's all just a matter of, for us, the big question is, why hasn't it been done before? And the answer to us is that no one really just ever had the guts to do it. So we'll do it. We'll give it a shot. And if we fail, we fail, and we'll do it publicly. Education, arts, and culture. Some of you might know the Big Rig Jig. It's right now actually in Oakland right now, being cleaned up to be relocated permanently to downtown Vegas. It'll sit in the middle of an old motel, which we're renovating into small format retail. And it'll be a centerpiece that allows people to connect and hang out around it, and ultimately draws you in from 2 to 3 blocks away, gives you a reason to walk. This is a picture from the first Urban Burn at First Friday, which is a festival that we bought right before it went out of business. That happens every first Friday, and it was the first time that we've had essentially a burning man, in this case a woman, has been burned in the middle of a city like this. 25,000 people came out to see it, pretty much all locals. The praying mantis just found its home at the container park. It happened to stop by La Comida the other day and shoot fire at it. And it will be sitting in about 2 blocks away from the Big Rig Jig. So as you sort of get sucked into that, you look over and you see fire shooting across the street. And it's really just about creating an environment of surprise and pulling you in and helping to create something you didn't expect in your neighborhood. So you can tell we're not really about big, beautiful buildings. We're more about really cool experiences and something that sort of surprises you and keeps you guessing. To our spirit of co-learning, we started Downtown Speakers Series, which right now this is what we were just talking about. I'm the B squad that they sent. We've been hosting amazing speakers about once to twice a week for about a year now. 2 weeks ago, we had David Copperfield doing a Q&A with Kevin Rose, and something disappeared in the middle of it, as not to be, it's to totally be expected. We've had Singularity. We've had the CEO of Whole Foods. We've had Kevin. We've had people that you didn't expect. Next week we have Simon Sinek, who's one of my favorite speakers of all. We have amazing people coming through Vegas. We have amazing things happening. And as we proceed over the next couple of months, we're actually creating a number of venues that'll support not only once or twice a week, but once or twice a day. And that creates an environment where when you just want to take a break, you can always go see a great speaker. You don't have to go to TED.com. On the culture side, this is something that sort of surprisingly happened. We met someone who worked at the Cosmopolitan, who was instrumental in creating an independent music scene, or a burgeoning one in Vegas. He wanted to do something more, so we invested in Life is Beautiful, which will be pretty much the only time a 16-block area has been shut down for a music and food festival. It's going to be amazing, and probably 3 weeks after the Zappos campus moves in is when it's going to start to kind of take its hold on downtown Vegas, which will make it even more chaotic once we move in. And I wanted to show you a quick video just to give you a sense of the scale. So what's so powerful to me about that is a year and a half ago we hadn't thought of it, no one had thought of it, and what's even more powerful is that I recognize about half of the people that were in that video. And it wasn't something that we hired extras for. It was produced by a company that we invested in called Downtown Films. It's the video itself. I know the guys that were in the mouse suits. I was standing on the sidewalk saying I'm not going to dance. And so the whole idea is everything that we do so frequently comes down to the people that are in our community, and we drive it forward because we want to. And that to me is very powerful. So back to what I said about real estate. If you haven't read this book, you need to read this book. Trying for the City by Ed Glazer. He's a Harvard economics professor who did the research going back 1,000 years to the way that cities have evolved. And I think the number of the things that he identified were, number one, the residential density equation that started with Jane Jacobs, but he found that correlation to ground level activity. And we began to think about it a little bit more deeply, that there's actually more to be done than just creating the residential. There's a culture that you need to invest in. And so our focus through Life is Beautiful, to the things we create on the ground, is about creating and setting the tone for that culture. The residential will follow. But I highly suggest you read this book. It changed, it absolutely, it is the reason why we started Downtown Project. We hadn't thought of it in the fall of 2011 until we read that book. So when I said that the city's doubled in size, innovation and happiness increase by 15%, the ingredients of serendipity and all the things that I've covered before, the concept that we're thinking about now is what happens when we take 2,000 people and we put them into the Las Vegas City Hall, and then we add the fact that we have 1,000 Teach for America core members and alumni in Vegas and centering themselves around Vegas. We have this amazing startup community, the small business community of passionate entrepreneurs, art and music. I mean, what you just saw at Life is Beautiful is a collaboration of hundreds of different types of artists. And then other different passion communities like woodworking or 3D printing and robotics, which is a big focus for us right now, plus everyone that lives there now. You begin to sort of get this mixture of amazingness that you otherwise wouldn't get if you tried to pre-program it yourself. So overall, we're basically thinking that learning from Zappos, we believe that culture being the most important thing to a company is sort of analogous to community to a city, and community is just another representation of the word culture and this feeling of optimism. And essentially that mixture creates this amazing opportunity for upward mobility, this concept that you can move somewhere, be somewhere, and do whatever you want. Embracing the concept of serendipity over pre-planning and pre-thinking things through. We experiment with ways to connect people. So once we have those people there, what do? We use things like the praying mantis to be a wayfinding tool. In most cities, it's a sign. In our case, it's a giant bug that shoots fire. We play around with gorilla. This actually was a project in Raleigh that got ripped down by the city, but it was so popular with people that the city came along and ended up paying the guy to do it across the whole town. And the guy's name is Matt, and he has just amazing ideas about how to move people in cities, and we say, why not? We ask questions like what moves people, and most of you who've been obviously in San Francisco, you know where this came from. The guys, Architecture for Humanity and this guy Matt were the people that made this happen in SF. And we think that there's a lot to be learned from the concept of non-traditional things moving people. We ask questions like, what does a streetscape do? This is a map of San Francisco that overlays crime, cabs, and taxis, and finds that where there's the yellow is actually a representation of crime, and the blue is a representation of trees. What correlation do those two things have on each other? Clearly, it's pretty powerful. Maybe it's not the single one, but it's pretty powerful. We look at cities like New York and others and say, how can we better invest in places for people to gather on the street and have safe places to bike? How are they going to get around? And then we make big decisions like building a building for 2,000 people but only having 1,000 parking spaces. And we say, well, now we're probably going to have to test how this concept of mobility and walkability and how people are going to get around. So we ask the question, what happens when you eliminate cost as a factor? And this is where I get to my favorite topic. What happens when you eliminate cost as a factor and essentially say mobility is free with the exception of the monthly membership, but that action of moving is something that you shouldn't have to think about. What would happen if you had a car service for every one of you had a car, a driver sitting right outside the store, and they would be with you within 5 minutes, and you could go anywhere you wanted to go, and it wouldn't cost you anything? How would that change the way you move in a city when you can't necessarily walk? What happens when you bring together every possible mobility option and eliminate you having to choose between a taxi, an Uber, and a bike and a bus? What happens to your sense of mobility when you combine that with a truly walkable city with non-traditional wayfinding? So we launched Project 100. We're in the process of building it, of launching the company now, and by the end of the month we'll have 12 full-time employees. By the end of next year we'll have taken delivery of 100 Model S's. Vehicles like Twizy's from Nissan and Renault we're bringing to the urban core. Federating bikes is a free option for our members and using shuttle buses to handle high-density routes. We're reshaping point-to-point transportation in a way that cities can't do with a subsidized $2 route. But ultimately, on a per-ride basis, you're probably going to pay a lot less than $2. And the idea is that if you eliminate the mobility question from people's lives, what happens? How do they move around a 15 to 20 block area differently? Can you go to 4 places in a night instead of 1? Can you eat lunch across the way and run into other people that aren't necessarily right across from your office? How does that change how you interact with people? If you guys come to Vegas, and you email me, I'll tell you should probably stay at the Ogden, which is where Tony and I moved a couple of years ago. I recently moved down the street, but he lives in the top left corner there, and we have about now 100 beds that we treat like free hotel rooms. And the idea first was someone would email us and say, hey, I'm coming to town, what's going on in Vegas? And we'd say, hey, we'll just come stay here. We have a bed, you can hang out and just work downtown for a couple of days, which was our way of tricking them into coming and hanging out and seeing what we were working on. And what we actually found from those experiences was kind of the same thing you learn at an event like Summit or TED, where the magic of a community is not what happens when it's pre-programmed, but what happens in between. And that to us is actually what Vegas can be every day. So I'll speak more to that in a second, but we're investing in things like the Inspired Theater to support the speaker series on not only a daily basis, but an hourly or half-hour basis, where you always know you can walk right on in at any point in the day, and there'll be an interesting talk by someone who has something to share every half hour on the hour, most days of the week. They always like silhouette Tony in there, and it's kind of creepy. And so what actually ended up happening was we accidentally created this cadence of things. So first it was about trying to consolidate all these amazing people in tech to come on one week, so they ran into each other. And then once they did that, we realized there was a lot more magic that was happening than we could ever possibly create. So we started theming every week. Week 1 is First Friday, the Arts Festival. Week 2 is Tech Cocktail Week. Week 3 is focused on fashion with talks and workshops for fashion folks, which you can tell I'm not one of. And week 4 is kind of everything else. Catalyst is about inspiring a different way of thinking. It's sort of like a mini TED. And so we did that, and we realized, well, people asked us, well, what are you doing to bring people here over the long term? And that got us thinking, well, what does it actually mean to be a resident of a city? And this is a simple mathematical calculation. If you take in travel and life and different things you have to do, you generally speaking, for most of the year, in 1 year, you're essentially collisionable out connecting with the community about 1,000 hours a year, if you take out laundry and errands and so forth. So this question came from a guy named Jake, who at the time had the biggest fashion-related Kickstarter campaign ever, based on underwear. And this is another terrible photo that he would hate that we're showing. But the question from him was, I want to be a part of this on a regular basis, but I can't be here 100%. I have a family, I have a warehouse in New York. Is there a middle ground? And so we thought for a second, what does it mean to actually be a purposeful person in a community versus a dedicated person? So we did a little math calculation and found that essentially if you come for 3 to 4 days a week, 12 times a year, your collisionable hours, when you're more purposeful, you don't have errands to run, you don't have kids to pick up, you're actually about as collisionable as I am by coming once a month versus being there all the time. So we have this idea of subscribing to downtown Vegas. So what we have now is there's a routine set of 20 or 30 people that we all see every month for about a week. And those people, in my opinion, are almost more collisionable and powerful in the neighborhood than even I am, because I have things going on and they don't. They're 100%. So back to our ROC calculation, if you break down 100 residents per acre, that actually, if you start thinking about what I said about Natalie's calculation of more about collisionable hours than dollars, and this is an awkward slide, but essentially, instead of thinking of 100 people per acre, we think about 100 collisionable community hours per acre per year, 100,000. And that really is actually what kind of happened to Natalie, except she's on about probably 1/20th of an acre, and she's getting 100,000 collisions in a year for about an hour at a time. So Natalie is a part of sort of what creates that collisionable neighborhood and those density points that people connect in. So back to what I said, Triumph of the City, I think, is probably one of the best books that you can read about how to build a city. And the reason why it makes sense to us is because there's a general trend around the world where while we all are a little bit over about half to 60% in cities today, in our lifetime, more than 3/4 of the planet will live in cities. So if we don't figure out how to make a city a productive and happy part of our lives, we're not going to be successful in our evolution. We're going to continue to kind of spiral out of control. So essentially, when you combine all these things, collisions, community, co-learning, and all the environmental variables that I just described, at the end of the day, the question is what will people say about downtown? And to us, we believe that the big bet is that downtown Vegas will make you smarter. And that's something that we've spent the last 2 years trying to figure out how to create. And that's really all I have to share with you right now. Kind of blasted through a lot. Yay.
I'm just curious more about the mobility stuff that you were talking about. Have you already launched all those different services, and how is it going, and do people like that?
So yes and no. We are about 4 to 6 months away from phase 1 beta of Project 100, which will essentially focus first on very enhanced driving mobility, so essentially car sharing with the urban vehicle and Teslas and bikes in the core. Phase 2, a few months after that, we'll add drivers to handle when you can't drive yourself. And then we'll expand geographically to include the residential area around downtown. We're very much on the pathway to doing that. By mid-September, we'll have a team of 12 focused on it, and I expect to launch in about February. I think most people, we kind of point to the Henry Ford problem quite a bit, that you know you like Uber, you know you like bikes, you know you like to drive. The question is, what happens when you put all those things together? And we don't know what human behavior will be when all those options are equalized. I'm sure people will love driving and riding in a Tesla, but it's more long-term. What will they do with that type of mobility? So we're very focused on getting the right experiment in place so we can understand.
So it seems like you guys have done a lot to sort of work around the area in downtown through your own startup endeavors, but what efforts have you taken, or do you have plans to take more efforts to sort of work with existing infrastructure and communities and institutions, I guess, in Las Vegas? Things like places like UNLV is really right down the street, and it seems like you guys could do a lot to sort of partner with them, considering their budget issues in the last few years and things like that, to sort of help create more of an incubator for things that you guys don't have to create yourself, but you're working with something that's already there.
So Teach for America is an example of how we try to take the work that we're doing and let it spread more equally across the existing community and neighborhood. Specifically to UNLV, we have a unique challenge there. That UNLV is not a community school. It's very much a commuter school, and so it's about 4 miles down the street, but no one really lives on campus. It's very much a drive-in, drive-out. And when we sit down we had that same idea a couple of years ago when we first started, and we sat down with the president of the university, and his solution to helping entrepreneurs or helping technologists, for example, understand that what they're learning today could help them start a company was to create a joint MBA, Master's in Computer Science program. And that's everything they want to do is about formality, and we were more like, just get them to startup weekend, right? Let's just get a car and drive them down there, and that's step one. So we're slowly making progress in that area, but I think in Las Vegas, with the institutional folks in casinos, hospitality, education, there's very much a insular attitude, and so we're just saying, okay, we'll just start, we'll create something, and then we'll be here, and the door's wide open. But we have to demonstrate that we've got our stuff together before I think they'll listen to us. So the jury's still out.
Could you talk a little bit about sort of the reception from different ethnic communities and also class, just class-wide, how's that all, how are they looking, how they're seeing the downtown project and the participation?
Sure. The neighborhood that we're centered in, one was barren, so that's a challenge. A challenge in the sense that there was no one really there. Downtown's really weird. It's dirt and empty hotels. We're surrounded by very family-focused, but not necessarily wealthy neighborhoods. Just north of us is a huge Hispanic neighborhood. East of us is a kind of a hodgepodge. Generally speaking, our approach, and it kind of is reflected in the people that are sort of a part of driving the things that we're investing in and building. Our ethos is not to create something that's closed off and to create something that's accessible. So ultimately, we think that when it comes to housing or restaurants or food, we have this opportunity, for example, with grocery to get rid of a food desert, and to do that, you have to have approachable pricing, and it doesn't just have to support someone like Tony. It needs to support someone who is on food stamps. So our general approach has been, to a degree. Someone asked a similar question in a talk a couple days ago about getting more female entrepreneurs, and we said, we don't necessarily have a focus on an outward focus on doing it, but we're not closed off at all. We ultimately think that the melting pot that is our neighborhood can support that diversity over time. So we're not reaching out too heavily to any group from any background, but if you come visit, you could tell that it's a pretty diverse pot of people that are in our neighborhood from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, and that's what makes it magical. And that's the risk that we have in investing, is that we'll end up shutting that group out. So we try really, really hard to make sure that we and no one else comes in and sort of gentrifies the neighborhood. That's a really tough thing to do.
So I know cities like New York and San Francisco attract a lot of talented people from outside areas, and other thriving cities, I guess, have, like Austin and Pittsburgh, have research or tech universities.
Right.
So how does Vegas or your project consider bringing in outside talent and entrepreneurs and artists?
So we host, just a random stat, we host about 100 people in our crash pads every week, and the number one recurring visitor home is New York. I think what happened initially is similar to what happened to Zappos. We focus very heavily on the experience on the ground, and when a random person comes and tells another friend, it begins to compound upon itself. So what we've seen both organically and with things like Tech Cocktail Week and Catalyst Week is this explosion of interest and word of mouth sharing that has led to 37 companies in VegasTechFund portfolio, probably 25 of which are from either Seattle, San Francisco, or New York. They weren't companies we bought into Vegas. They wanted to come, and we happened to participate in the investment kind of as a secondary thing. Dozens more, either in tech or elsewhere, that have independently moved. I think because of the entrepreneurial spirit on the ground, it's tough to not be infected by it when you're there. So I think globally by focusing more on that sort of the experience when you're there and the resources that are there. We feel like if you come to Vegas, you're probably going to come back here and tell 5 friends, and that begins to compound upon itself. And we'd rather do that than go out and buy an ad. If that makes sense. Thank you.